The music was still playing when everything changed. Soft piano notes drifted through the air like whispered promises, weaving between white lights that had been strung with painstaking care across the garden pavilion. 200 guests stood with champagne glasses raised, their faces glowing in the warm amber light of an evening designed to celebrate love, commitment, and the beginning of something beautiful. My bride's hand rested in mine, her fingers warm and steady. Sophie had never looked more radiant than she did in that moment, her dark hair swept back, her eyes catching the light with a brilliance that made my chest ache. We had waited 3 years for this day, 3 years of late nights and early mornings, of planning and postponing, of building something together that felt unshakable. The ceremony had been perfect, the vows had been spoken, and now, surrounded by everyone we loved, we were supposed to begin the celebration of our new life together. The best man, my college roommate David, was halfway through his toast. He had been nervous about it for weeks, practicing in my living room, asking Sophie for feedback, rewriting the ending 4 times. Now he stood at the microphone with surprising confidence, telling stories about our freshman year, about the time I had accidentally set off the fire alarm trying to cook pasta at 2 in the morning. Guests laughed. Sophie squeezed my hand. My mother dabbed at her eyes near the cake table. Everything felt suspended in amber, preserved in that perfect stillness that comes before photographs are taken and memories are sealed. Then I noticed movement at the back of the room. Karen Whitfield was standing up. At first, I thought nothing of it. Perhaps she needed to use the restroom. Perhaps she had received an urgent call. Karen was the CEO of the company where I had worked for nearly 8 years, climbing from junior analyst to vice president of operations. She had been invited out of professional obligation, the kind of courtesy extended to powerful people who expect inclusion in significant events. I had not expected her to actually attend. But Karen was not leaving. She was walking forward, and she was carrying her champagne glass with the deliberate precision of someone about to make a speech. David's voice faltered. He glanced toward the approaching figure, then back at me, confusion flickering across his face. The piano music faded as the musicians sensed something shifting in the room's energy. Karen reached the edge of the dance floor and stopped. She lifted her glass, not in a toast, but as a signal, a command for attention she had perfected in 1,000 boardrooms and quarterly reviews. The room went silent. 200 faces turned toward her, expecting warmth, perhaps a professional anecdote about the groom's dedication, maybe a light-hearted comment about work-life balance. Karen was known for her sharp tongue, but surely even she understood the boundaries of a wedding reception. She smiled. It was the smile she wore when delivering bad news, the one that suggested she was doing you a favor by being direct. "Evan," she said, her voice cutting through the silence with surgical precision, "since you clearly don't respect company priorities, consider this your termination." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. A few guests exchanged glances, waiting for the punchline that would transform this strange moment into corporate humor. My cousin Marcus actually chuckled, assuming this was some elaborate inside joke he didn't understand. Karen was not laughing. She adjusted her blazer with the same motion she used before every difficult conversation, that small straightening of fabric that signaled she was about to dismantle something. "You missed a board prep call for this," she continued, gesturing dismissively at the flowers, the chandeliers, the string lights, the 200 people who had traveled from across the country to witness our union. "I won't have leadership who thinks their personal life comes before company obligations." The laughter died. Silence rushed in to fill the void, heavy and suffocating. My mother froze mid-step near the dessert table. Her smile was still fixed in place, a reflex that hadn't caught up with reality, but her eyes had gone dark with something between confusion and a fury I had rarely seen from her. My father's hand found her arm, steadying her, holding her back from whatever instinct was rising in her chest. David stood motionless at the microphone, mouth slightly open, the remainder of his toast forgotten. My best man leaned toward me, his voice barely audible. "Is this real?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The room had tilted on its axis, not from shock, not from humiliation. from something else entirely, something that felt dangerously, impossibly like clarity. Sophie's fingers tightened around mine. Her face remained composed, a stillness that came from years of watching me navigate corporate warfare from the sidelines. She had seen me come home exhausted from battles I couldn't fully explain. She had held me through reorganizations and power plays and the quiet devastation of watching colleagues destroyed by people like Karen. Now she leaned close, her lips barely moving against my ear. Does she know? I shook my head slowly, feeling a calm settle over me that surprised even myself. No one does. Karen nodded once, sharp and final, the same gesture she used when closing deals she considered beneath her full attention. Collect your things Monday morning. Security will escort you from the building. She paused, savoring the silence she had created. Consider this a lesson in priorities. She sat down, smoothing her dress with apparent satisfaction. In her mind, the matter was settled. She had made her point. She had demonstrated her power. She had shown everyone present that Evan Brooks was expendable, replaceable, subordinate to her will. She had no idea what she had just done. I should explain something about Karen Whitfield. She had risen to the CEO position through a combination of genuine talent and ruthless political maneuvering. She was brilliant in ways that made people uncomfortable, able to see 3 moves ahead in any negotiation, capable of reading a room's power dynamics within seconds of entering. But her brilliance had calcified into arrogance over the years, the kind that comes from never being challenged, never being told no, never facing consequences for behavior that would have destroyed anyone else. I had survived her for 8 years by being useful, by being exceptional at my job, by never giving her ammunition. But I had also been planning, quietly, carefully, for 5 years. What Karen didn't know, what no one in that room knew except Sophie and our attorney, was that during a messy merger 5 years ago, when the company was scrambling for stable footing and liquidating assets to cover unexpected debts, I had quietly purchased the warehouse, office complex, and parking structure that housed every aspect of our operations. The opportunity had appeared like a gift. The previous owner, a real estate investment trust in the midst of its own collapse, had needed to sell quickly. The company had been so focused on the merger, on integrating systems and cutting redundancies, that no one had paid attention to who was buying the very ground beneath their feet. I had used savings, investment returns, and a loan from Sophie's grandmother, who had taken an immediate liking to me when I'd helped untangle her estate planning the year before. Different name, separate LLC. Ironclad paperwork buried under layers of legal protection that would take an army of attorneys to untangle. Brooks Property Holdings, LLC. My name wasn't on it directly. My control was absolute. The company paid rent every month. Karen herself had signed the lease renewal 18 months ago, her signature bold and impatient on the final page. She had never bothered to read beyond the payment terms. Why would she? It was just paperwork. Just another document in a stack of documents that crossed her desk between more important things. She had never looked at the owner line. She had never asked who held the deed to everything she commanded. Now, standing at my own wedding reception, watching her sip champagne with the satisfaction of someone who believed she had won something that night, I felt nothing but a strange, quiet peace. Slowly, I raised my glass. The room went silent again, but different this time, anticipatory. Every guest leaned forward slightly, waiting to see how the groom would respond to his own execution. Some expected anger, others braced for humiliation. A few who knew me well saw something in my eyes that made them uneasy in a different way. "Thank you, Karen," I said, my voice steady and clear, "for clarifying priorities." She smirked from her seat, champagne glass still in hand. I turned to Sophie, letting the moment breathe. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw understanding, trust, and the faintest glimmer of anticipation. She knew what was coming, not the details, but the shape of it. She had married someone who planned 3 moves ahead. "And thank you," I said, loud enough for every guest to hear, "for marrying someone who always thinks 3 moves ahead."
Applause broke the tension like shattering glass. Nervous, relieved, uncertain applause, but applause nonetheless. The piano resumed. Conversations restarted in hushed, urgent tones. David hurried to finish his toast, his words rushing together in a confused tumble that no one was really listening to anymore. Karen sat back, arms crossed, apparently convinced she had won something significant that night. She had made her point, she had demonstrated her power, she had shown everyone present that Evan Brooks was expendable, replaceable, subordinate to her will. She had no idea what she had just done. The wedding continued despite everything. Cake was cut, first dances were danced, toasts were given by people who carefully avoided mentioning what had happened. My mother cornered me near the bar at one point, her face tight with barely contained rage.
"Who does she think she is?" she whispered fiercely. "At your wedding, Evan, your wedding." I kissed her forehead. "It's handled, Mom." "Handled how? You can't let her—" "It's handled." Something in my voice made her stop. She studied my face for a long moment, searching for signs of devastation that weren't there. Finding none, she nodded slowly, trusting in something she didn't fully understand. Sophie and I left the reception at midnight, rice still caught in her hair, the weight of the day settling around us like a comfortable blanket. In the car, she turned to me with the smile she reserved for moments when she knew I had a secret. "Monday is going to be interesting," she said. I kissed her hand. "Monday is going to be educational." The weekend passed in the comfortable haze of newlywed bliss. We ignored our phones, we made breakfast in our pajamas, we pretended the world outside our apartment didn't exist. But beneath the surface, beneath the lazy mornings and whispered conversations, I was preparing. Sunday night, I sent one email. Monday morning arrived with pale sunlight streaming through windows that looked out over a city just beginning to wake up. At 7:59 a.m., exactly 1 minute before Karen would strut into the office she believed she controlled, Brooks Property Holdings, LLC, filed notice of lease termination. Karen arrived at 8:01. Her heels clicked against marble floors with the rhythm of absolute confidence. She was already composing emails in her head, already planning how she would announce my departure, already thinking about leadership transitions and the importance of corporate discipline. At 8:03, Mark Reynolds burst through her office door without knocking. He was the CFO, a careful man who had survived 3 regime changes through a combination of competence and strategic invisibility. Now his face had gone the color of old paper. "Karen," he said, closing the door behind him with unsteady hands, "we have a problem." She waved him off without looking up from her laptop. "I've fired Evan. We'll find a replacement within the quarter. Run the standard separation protocols." Mark swallowed visibly. His tie seemed tighter than usual. "The building lease," he said. Karen's fingers paused over the keyboard. For the first time that morning, she actually looked at him. "What about it?" "It was terminated at 7:59 this morning." For 3 full seconds, Karen didn't move. Her face underwent a rapid series of calculations, trying to force this new information into a framework that made sense. Then she refreshed her inbox with the careful precision of someone hoping reality might rearrange itself if she simply refused to acknowledge it. The email was waiting at the top. Subject, Notice of Possession. She clicked it open. The body was brief and devastating. Effective immediately, occupancy rights are revoked under Section 14 of the lease agreement. All operations must cease within 30 days. Property access will be restricted beginning day 15. Security protocols will be transferred to property management. Signed, Brooks Property Holdings, LLC. Karen read it 3 times. Then once more, her lips moving slightly, as if speaking the words aloud might change their meaning. Her phone buzzed on the desk. The caller ID glowed with 2 words she had never expected to see so soon. Evan Brooks. She stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The message was already perfectly, devastatingly clear. Firing me at my wedding was the most expensive decision of her career. The board call began at 9:06 a.m. Emergency session. All members present, their faces arranged in the small boxes of a video conference that had been called with unusual urgency. Karen's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something she probably hoped sounded like measured concern rather than barely controlled panic. "We have a temporary facilities issue, a landlord dispute, nothing that can't be resolved through standard negotiation channels." Mark muted his microphone and leaned toward another executive, his whisper carrying clearly in the quiet room. "That building is the company, servers, distribution center, permits, everything." Karen glared at him through the conference screen. "The building is leased. We have contractual rights. We have legal protections." Mark unmuted slowly, his face pale. "The building is leased from Evan." Silence consumed the call. 7 faces stared from 7 boxes, each one processing the implications at different speeds. One board member leaned forward, his face filling his camera frame. Richard Chen had been on the board for 12 years. He had seen crises come and go, but something in his expression suggested this was different. "Let me understand this correctly," he said, his voice deliberately calm. "You fired the landlord at his wedding?" Karen opened her mouth to respond. Nothing came out. The lease document appeared on screen moments later, shared by the company attorney who had been frantically searching through digital files since the moment Mark's message had reached her. 28 pages of dense legal language filled the conference display, clauses and subclauses that seemed like standard boilerplate when they were signed, but now read like a carefully constructed trap. Karen's signature sat bold and impatient on the final page. Above it, in print that suddenly seemed much larger than it had 18 months ago, owner, Brooks Property Holdings, LLC. "I don't understand," Karen said, her voice carrying an edge of desperation she couldn't quite conceal. "He must have added that clause later. He must have modified the document. This is fraud. We can fight this." Patricia shook her head slowly. "The lease was executed 18 months ago. I have the original in our files. Section 14 was present from the beginning. It was," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "it was noted in my review. I flagged it as unusual. The recommendation was to negotiate different terms." "And?" Patricia glanced at Karen through the screen. "I was told to approve the lease as written, that the relationship with the landlord was not a concern." The silence that followed was deafening. By noon, Karen had called my phone 6 times. Each call went to voicemail. The mailbox was not full. I simply wasn't answering. I was, at that moment, having brunch with Sophie at a small cafe 3 blocks from our apartment, eating eggs and drinking coffee and watching the notifications pile up on a phone I had deliberately placed face down on the table. Sophie picked up her mimosa. "How many calls?" 6 from Karen, 4 from numbers I don't recognize, probably board members. "Are you going to answer any of them?" I smiled and reached across the table to take her hand. "Not today. Today we're still on our honeymoon." She laughed, that warm sound that had first caught my attention across a crowded networking event 4 years ago. "Some honeymoon? Shouldn't we be on a beach somewhere?" "Next week. Today we're enjoying the chaos." My phone buzzed again, a text this time. "Karen Whitfield, this is unprofessional. We need to renegotiate like adults. Name your terms." I showed it to Sophie. She raised an eyebrow. "What are you going to say?" I typed a single sentence and hit send. "We're following the contract you signed." Then I put the phone away and ordered another coffee. Back at the office, Karen was spiraling. She had tried HR, demanding they find some policy, some procedure, some form of leverage she could use against a former employee who was no longer a former employee, but a property owner exercising his legal rights. They had nothing. I wasn't an employee anymore. She had made certain of that in front of 200 witnesses at a wedding reception that was, even now, becoming the most talked about event in our industry's recent memory. She had tried legal, pushing Patricia to find some loophole, some challenge, some way to invalidate a lease that Karen herself had signed. Patricia was gentle but firm. The lease was valid. The termination was valid. The company had 30 days to vacate a building that housed its servers, its distribution center, its permits, its entire operational infrastructure. It was, in every practical sense, impossible. The wedding video surfaced online that afternoon. It wasn't malicious, at least not intentionally. Someone's aunt had been recording the toasts on her phone. She had caught everything.
Karen walking forward, the announcement, the silence, my response. She had uploaded it to a family group chat, which had leaked to a friend, which had leaked to social media, which had leaked everywhere. By 3 o'clock, the video had been viewed 40,000 times.
The caption that accompanied it was simple and devastating. CEO fires employee at his own wedding. Comments exploded beneath it. Industry professionals weighed in with shock and condemnation. Leadership experts analyzed Karen's body language. HR consultants called it the most egregious violation of professional boundaries they had ever witnessed. Someone created a meme. Someone else wrote a think piece. The company's social media team went into crisis mode, trying to craft a response that didn't exist. There was no response. There was no spin that could make this acceptable. Karen had fired an employee at his wedding reception, in front of his family, in front of his new wife, in front of 200 people who were now all too happy to share what they had witnessed. The board saw the video before it reached 100,000 views. Richard Chen watched it 3 times, his face growing stonier with each viewing. He had been uncertain that morning, willing to consider that perhaps there was context he didn't understand. Now he was certain of only one thing. This was a disaster. The emergency board meeting that afternoon was not optional. All members attended. Karen was present, but the dynamic had shifted. She was no longer leading the conversation. She was defending herself. "The timing was unfortunate," she said, her voice strained with a confidence she no longer possessed. "But the decision to terminate was sound. He missed a board prep call. He demonstrated misaligned priorities." "He missed a board prep call," Richard repeated slowly, "because he was getting married. Leadership requires sacrifice. Leadership requires judgment." Richard's voice had dropped to the quiet register that everyone on the board recognized as dangerous. "And your judgment, Karen, has just cost this company its operating location, its public reputation, and potentially its viability." At 4 o'clock, Lena Park joined the call. Outside counsel, independent, brought in to provide objective legal assessment, which everyone understood meant brought in to tell the board how much trouble they were actually in. Lena was a partner at one of the city's most respected firms. She had represented companies through hostile takeovers, regulatory investigations, and public relations catastrophes. Her face revealed nothing as she joined the video conference, her background a neutral blur that gave away nothing about her surroundings. "Let me summarize the situation as I understand it," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Mr. Brooks owns the building. His lease termination is valid. The company has 30 days to relocate operations that cannot reasonably be relocated in 30 days. Separately, there is video evidence of the CEO publicly terminating Mr. Brooks at a private family event, which is now circulating widely on social media." She paused, letting each element settle. "From a legal standpoint, Mr. Brooks has done nothing wrong. He is a property owner, exercising his contractual rights. The timing may seem retaliatory, but the lease explicitly grants him this power without requiring cause or justification. Any attempt to challenge the termination in court would likely fail and would certainly generate additional negative publicity." Karen leaned forward. "So we have no recourse?" Lena met her gaze through the screen. "Against him, no. The question the board should be considering is what recourse they have regarding the decisions that led to this situation." The implication hung in the air like smoke. "Additionally," Lena continued, "the public termination at a private event raises questions, not about him, about the company, about its leadership, about whether this represents a pattern of behavior that could expose the organization to future liability." Karen shifted in her seat. "Questions about him, surely. He's the one who—" Lena cut her off with a look. "Ms. Whitfield, I've reviewed the video. I've spoken with witnesses. The questions being asked are about you, about your judgment, about whether you represent the kind of leadership this company wants to project to employees, to clients, to the public." The meeting continued for another hour, but the outcome was already determined. The board scheduled a closed session for the following morning, without Karen.
She was escorted from the call with polite phrases about needing to discuss procedural matters, but everyone understood what was happening. The foundation beneath her was crumbling. I received a call from Mark Reynolds that evening, not on behalf of the company, personally. We had worked together for 6 years, and despite his careful neutrality in all things political, there had always been a quiet respect between us. "Evan," he said, his voice tired, "I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm not calling on anyone's behalf. He paused. "I wanted you to know that some of us saw what she did. Some of us understood how wrong it was." I was standing on our apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Sophie was inside, reading a book, giving me space for a conversation she knew I needed to have alone. "I appreciate that, Mark. The board is meeting tomorrow, without her. I think," he hesitated, "I think it's over. Her position, everything she built. I think you ended it." "She ended it herself, at my wedding, in front of my mother." Mark was quiet for a moment. "What happens now, to the company?" "I haven't decided yet. A lot of good people work there, Evan. People who had nothing to do with what she did. People who are terrified right now about their jobs, their mortgages, their kids' schools." I looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, hundreds of people were lying awake, worrying about a future that had been destabilized by a single act of arrogance. They hadn't fired me at my wedding. They had just been caught in the blast radius. "I know," I said. "I'll think about it." The investigation report arrived 4 days later. The board had hired an outside firm, not HR, not legal spin doctors who could be pressured into favorable conclusions, independent analysts with no stake in the outcome and no reason to protect anyone. Their findings were delivered in a 30-page document that left no room for interpretation. Public termination at a private event constitutes reputational misconduct, creates material risk exposure, demonstrates judgment inconsistent with executive leadership standards. Pattern of behavior suggests systemic issues with leadership approach that require immediate remediation. Karen's name appeared 16 times in the document. Not once was it in a favorable context. The board meeting that followed lasted 9 minutes. 9 minutes to undo 8 years of Karen's careful empire building. 9 minutes to acknowledge what everyone already knew. The chair read the motion aloud, his voice flat and formal. "Motion to terminate CEO Karen Whitfield, effective immediately, with standard severance terms contingent on execution of non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements." Every hand raised. The gavel came down once, clean and final. Karen was informed by phone. I was told later that she listened in silence, asked one question about her personal belongings in her office, and hung up without saying goodbye. Her LinkedIn profile was updated within hours, exploring new opportunities. Comments were disabled. The new interim CEO reached out the following week. Her name was Sandra Chen, no relation to Richard, a board member who had been drafted into the role while a permanent search was conducted. She had a reputation for competence and fairness, and her voice on the phone carried none of Karen's sharp edges. "Mr. Brooks," she said carefully, "I'm calling to discuss the future of our building arrangement. I understand if you're not interested in continuing any relationship with our organization, given what happened, but I wanted to at least have the conversation." I was in my home office, Sophie working on her laptop across the room. She looked up when she heard me take the call, watching my face for signals. "I'm willing to meet," I said. The negotiation took 3 days. Different lawyers, different tone, different respect. Sandra came to the meetings herself, which Karen would never have done. She listened more than she spoke. She acknowledged what happened without making excuses. She asked what I wanted rather than demanding what she needed. In the end, we signed a new lease. Market rate, shorter term, stronger guarantees for both parties. Provisions for early termination that protected the company from sudden displacement, but protected me from another Karen deciding to weaponize the relationship. The company kept its doors open, its employees kept their jobs, its clients kept their services, just not under Karen's leadership. An email went out to all staff that Friday, not corporate boilerplate drafted by lawyers and sanitized of all meaning, specific, direct, honest in a way that corporate communications rarely manage to be. We apologize to Evan Brooks for the unprofessional conduct he experienced, which does not reflect our values as an organization. We are committed to rebuilding trust with him and with all stakeholders who were affected by recent events. Leadership is a responsibility, not a weapon. We forgot that. We will not forget again. Sophie read it over my shoulder that evening, her chin resting against my arm, her warmth pressed against my back. "That one cost them," she said softly. "The legal team must have fought that wording for hours." Sandra pushed it through. She wanted it to mean something. She kissed my cheek. "Does it mean something to you?" I considered the question. The anger I had expected to feel had never fully materialized. There was satisfaction, certainly, vindication, the quiet pleasure of watching consequences unfold exactly as planned, but beneath all of it was something simpler. "It means I can move on," I said. "We can move on." Months passed. The company stabilized under Sandra's leadership. The permanent CEO search produced a candidate from outside the industry, someone with fresh perspective and no connection to Karen's regime.